I'll start. So welcome to our Bucky call for January 21st, 22nd, depending on which continent you're on. Whoop, Manu just went away. So he'll be glad that we're recording. So, Anne, it's so good to see you. And you've been so busy on stuff, and we've missed you dearly and glad you're here. So take your time, because nobody else is here, and give me a 15-minute summary, or maybe an hour, of what's been going on for you. What are you enjoying?
It's been a crazy actually a couple of months since just before Christmas, and because we have started on this fundraising journey for what we're doing, right? And we found the right partner who's actually moving forward and very aligned in what we're doing with education. And his is at a college tertiary level, and he trains SMEs and so on. And then he happened to be looking for a K-12 school to go on this journey, and I've known him for a long time, except that we lost contact for quite a while, and we met up again last year, I think, because of that reality show that another friend put me on, right? So we connected back, and now we are on this fundraising. And the weird thing was that we're getting banks coming in at the pre-series level, and I'm learning so much. And it's more like we knew how to do education, but we didn't have that missing component to do the fundraising, to do marketing and the sales for us, to oversee my team anyway. So we and you'll be very happy to know, because he is one of those who have made such an impact in tertiary education, and nobody knows about it.
Can you just repeat? And I inadvertently locked myself off the call. And I didn't, I don't know what happened. I just happened to press.
Yes. Hi, Manu. Yep. Because I was just sharing, with Steve that we are going on this fundraising journey, and it was really opportune for me that I caught up with an old friend who is going on this IPO journey, and what he was looking for is a K-12 school. So even back more than 10 years ago, when actually it was around 10 years ago when he started his college. So when I went to see what he was doing, I thought he was mad, because he was doing what colleges and tertiary education should do, but are not doing, right? The only problem for him, I felt, was he would have difficulty scaling, because he was coming into class, and he's a film producer. He has his own branding and marketing company, and he used to set up the mass comm departments for most of our top universities, in the private ones in Malaysia, right? So now more than 10 years later, we caught up again, and it was during that reality show, and he had already written out all his plan for this IPO journey, and what was missing was a K-12 school. So when we caught up again, it was like, wow, it was a really nice fit, because I was looking for the right people to go. Now, the reason why I'm excited about this is the way he's doing tertiary education, right? But he was going on to help the B40. So he was making money from all his talks and his training and everything, and he was pumping it into a college where he was targeting kids who were rejected by colleges and universities because our education systems failed them and called them rubbish of society, right? He was called rubbish of society, went on to US and got his 4.0 GPA, all because he was learning the right stuff and doing it in a way that suited him, right? So he knew it could be done, and he set up this college to do exactly that. Kids who couldn't afford to go to college and so on. The only problem is that when you go down that route, you literally have to fund it yourself, short of having more paying customers. But because he was going for the B40s and those who cannot study and all that, right, including gangsters and so on, and he turned their lives around. I met a few of them. They are like really amazing young people. So I wanted his college, and then when he talked to me about this whole journey, he said, do you want to come along? I said, yeah, okay. And I asked him if he could raise funds for my entire group. And off he went. And lo and behold, we are closing the pre-series before our time even, like the time that we set. And banks started coming in. When these banks came in, we found out that the mandate from our central bank, and in Malaysia, and the SSM, the Securities Commission, the mandate to all VCs and PEs and the investment banking side, that they have to focus on ESG companies. They have to start investing, and the companies they invested in has to be more ESG compliant, right? So they came to see our school. To date, we have 10 banks. 10 banks came in, including a Singapore bank, and the latest one is we're in talks with one of the largest government-linked companies in government-linked investment groups in Malaysia. So we're going to go into due diligence soon, and we found our CEO to head our SPV company, right? So when this happens, our dream will come true, because we'll be able to do what we need for education, and the question that I've asked myself in order to solve this problem was, who is the higher authority than the university? And we know the higher authority than the university is beyond the universities, and it is everybody who is successful in their industries. They should be the ones certifying, not the universities. But I know going down that route also, I'm gonna get a lot of pushback. But anyway, we're gonna do it in a manner where to shift it, where you have people, industry players being part of the certification process, and yet the kids will come out with a university degree. Okay, that one I'll share with you what I want to do with the college space. But for the moment, we are going on this journey, and then more on the ground with us on the education side. The Thailand is taking on, the Thai Health Department is taking on our little kindergarten curriculum, where the children are learning naturally. Because right now the kindergarten curriculum is just not natural. It doesn't use the kids' natural inclinations and energy and all that to learn. Definitely not in Asia. And a lot of the curriculum gets dumbed down. And so the Thai Health Department is, we're actually heading in, that people are coming over after Chinese New Year for the training. And we're heading to Thailand around March to begin the whole teaching and training that people to teach over there. And Japan is coming in, So I'm like, whoa, like, the COVID for 2 years, we were working, but it looked like, because we started doing the Little Unicorn, and it was that year that we started the Little Unicorn Kindergarten is a Finnish Asian hybrid. Because the West, there are lots and lots of good things in the Western education. There are lots of bad things in the Eastern education, but the drive for the academic side is really huge, right? So when people bring the Western education over, they cannot overlap that. They don't know how to merge these two, the East and the West together, right? So we went all the way down to kindergarten, and then we also set up our Biosphere Academy. And lo and behold, these two are now driving the whole process. And also our entrepreneur program, right, which we've been doing for 8 years. So now everything is coming together, and we are getting a lot of recognition for this. In fact, the Crown Prince of the state of Selangor, where we live, he will be coming over to launch our Biosphere school 26th of February. So those are some of the things that we are involved in, but we're so excited because now we'll be able to impact, children from pre-K all the way to college and university. And we're going to do it in a manner that is unlike, what people are doing. We're going to start with a business degree, and that has to change. Straight off, it has to change. First, you learn business, but we're going to park it into all the different industries. So that means if you're doing business, now we're going to train you on the business of engineering, business of health and wellness. And people can take these extra courses, to get those coming out business degree more ready for whichever industry that interests them. And they can do more than one, and they can even take on extra courses, micro-credentialing. You can take on engineering, a couple of courses, and I think they should do that. Yeah, and I know with this guy's college, he's letting me take charge of it and direct the future of where his college is going. Yeah, so now we're like, yes. The other one is the environment. We need a degree in the environment plus the science behind it and the business behind it.
Wow.
So are you joint venturing with him or what?
Yes,
you are K-12. Your
Yes,
program
so-
is K-12. He is kind of tertiary. And the
and
two of
corporate.
you are coming together.
Yes,
Okay.
corporate. So the whole model for what we're doing is it's not cradle to grave, because people talk about lifelong learning. It's like offline to online to the metaverse. So we are parking ourselves ready to have that future of being in the metaverse, because it's people going through this whole journey. You'll be perpetually needing help to acquire new skills. And he's strong in the SME and corporate training level, right? Very strong in marketing and sales and so on. So then where we're going with it is all the way to metaverse, where people will leave behind legacies. Okay, not end when when they're done with life, right? And the other one we're going to want to be is the #1 sales college and university in the world, because colleges shy away from selling and things like this, and that's the one that we need the most. But do it the right way. So I was talking to this partner of ours and said, look, because he's the one training his students to know how to sell, right? And it is about giving value, creating value, and I love it. So what we want to do is a diploma. When you get a diploma, means you can sell. You can be a salesperson, executive, or whatever in any industry, right? You have the skills and the tools on how to do it. But when you get a bachelor's degree, it means you have the skills of a sales manager to manage people and manage the sales of an organization. But when you get master's, that means you know how to sell at group level, the skills, manage, groups of multiple companies in an organization. And PhD, that means you know how to be director of sales. But in a practical manner, you really will go out there and do that job before you get that cert. And while you're doing that job, you will be getting that cert, So these are some of the things we want to shift out, to change out, are very much needed by organizations. Like I knew I needed that, because we hired like three teams of marketing people. We changed out 3 times and couldn't use them. And I found many other business owners who are struggling with this, business managers that they're struggling with, and who had no clue what they're doing. So, yeah, wow. I think that.
So Anne, if I listen well, your qualifications will be lifelong qualifications, because there's no way that you can, from what I heard from you, that you can say you are master of sales if you've not gone into a practicum of really selling. It means that the whole thing is a divorce. I mean, maybe you have to change name, because the divorce from the college, the normal college curriculum, where people go and they are master of communication, master of sales, without ever having even a year of practice. It's just a master degree, a certificate that is granted upon to you to say you are a master. And then you come now into practical life, where most of the time you're not even an entrepreneur, you're just an employee hired. And then you go and hang your master degree and start doing janitor work. Experience. Whereas you saying, okay, fine. A guy, we're going to recognize what is your actual experience in the practice of sales.
Yeah.
Right? Meaning that measure are going to be by how much volume of sales you bring in. How can you handle in a way that is durable a client?
Yeah.
How will you, for example, develop loyalty, repeat buys.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, those
Yes.
kind of things. It's kind of things that can use, you know, they do at or Steve does, you know, like
Mm,
the practical of it.
yeah.
Hey, John,
Like,
sorry, we didn't
yeah.
acknowledge you. How are you? Okay.
I'm
Happy New
very
Year.
interested in listening to what Anne is saying because it is
Yeah.
such a huge area of need. Such a huge area. I mean, we've gone from the perfection model to the discovery model for education, but we've only taken the first small steps in the direction. People come out of university with degrees that may give them some technical skills, but in terms of ever running a business or managing people or selling themselves or their product, they have no skills.
Yeah.
And
Hi, John.
And she even went
Hi, Anne.
further,
Nice to meet you.
John. She's saying that, you know, offline, I heard that, you know, maybe she can explain it again. She say offline, then transition to online.
Yeah.
And then the metaverse for
Yeah.
legacy.
I heard, yeah.
Yeah, all right.
No. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, that's what we're working on, and it's because I had people who joined us, yeah, and to do my marketing, even with a PhD. And one of the things I realized is that when you go through college or university, you know, you have assignments to do, right? And the lecturers will give, like say marketing, and in a marketing course, you could be doing branding, and you create something and you present, and they could get A's and so on. But the thing is, those A's, you don't know whether those suggestions actually will work. Most times they don't. It's so hard, right? And the problem is when they come out and they started working like for companies like ours, where we are unconventional, and our you know, the stories we tell is so different. They fall back to their old ways of, you know, okay, you go and check and see what the other companies in the same industry is doing. And so everything that we had they shrank it down to a regular school. Well, it was such a tough, you know, we just couldn't move with them, you know. So and we hired them to help us build our sales plan and our marketing and branding plan, and it was nothing we could use because they completely did not even listen to what we were saying. Well, it was the conditioning that came from the universities and the colleges was just unbelievable. Yeah. So that was the trouble we faced. Yeah.
Back in the 80s and 90s, I used to do a bunch of infomercials. If you were in the US, you would see. I walked into a mall once in Michigan, and somebody said, "Aren't you an actor? Haven't I seen you on TV?" I said, "Yeah, you stay up late and you watch infomercials." If you remember back in the 80s, they'd had these infomercials on everything. And I was one of the top 5 presenters in those things. And one of the groups, they did an infomercial that was actually a smash hit. It had tons of sales responses, and they just whipped it together. They didn't think it was much of anything, and it went viral. Everybody loved it. And they thought, wow, we're going to take the principles that we know about marketing. We're going to take that infomercial. We're going to rebuild it. We're going to structure it. And they redid a new infomercial, all structured professionally. They put it out there, and it went nowhere. It went nowhere. What people liked was the first one that they put together, because it was more spontaneous, it was more engaging, whatever. It wasn't so packaged up, you know. Contrived. Yeah, good word, John. So I get what you're saying. And who can explain what goes viral on social media right now? I mean, holy mackerel. It's chaos out there for so well, thanks so much for sharing. And Anne, do you want to just finish off by just telling us how you're feeling right now and what do you expect from tonight's meeting, and then pass it on to somebody?
Yes. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Steve. I'm so happy to be back with you know, with this meeting with all of you. Yeah, and I've missed it. So but the timing is actually, I think, also quite it's I'm looking forward to the meetings every Sunday, and because y'all give me so much of grounding, so much of a grounding to do what I do. And it allows me to explain to people clearly. You have no idea how much I'm talking about the cosmic integrity, and in the meetings, I'm telling them about how the universe, what the universe really is what is known, and what is unknown, which is nature, and how nature, if anything, it can be done, and nature allows it, it can happen. So that actually will take away a lot of biases and all that, So, but it has been brilliant. So I'm looking forward to, because I really missed a lot of the Grunch of Giant. I'm going to take note of the links for the videos. I really need to get into that one, so that I can see what we can do more with it. Okay, thank you so much, guys. So over to John. How are you
Thank
feeling?
you, Anne.
What takeaway today? Yes.
I'm feeling great. It's a beautiful but warm day in Perth. I've been for a walk in the park amongst the big trees, and feeling very happy to be back. I've missed it for a long time. I mean, there was the break anyway, but I came back yesterday from a week away, and I fly into state tonight. So I was just grateful that I was able to participate today, and particularly excited to hear you talking about education and about what is really important to the success of people's lives, and how much of what the experts teach is of very little relevance and real value. So yes, there's that struggle between what is really, really worthwhile and useful and what isn't. So yeah, excited to, I think that I might just learn a little tiny bit more this morning. So Manu, have you said how you feel and what you want to take out of today?
Not yet. I'm happy to take it.
Manu.
Yes, I feel grateful, I feel thankful, and really excited about what Susan is sharing here. And I say Susan, but what Anne is sharing. As John says, education, education, education. Dues to draw from, not to put in, to draw from. So, and that's the only way that we can really, really ride in an effective and productive way the tide of change and the tide of all the things that are going on around us into a future that we can't master, but at least we can ride towards horizons that we only dream of. So that's no less than what motivates me to be on this call every Sunday and to look forward to it all the time. Otherwise, I look forward for a very, very good exchange, an exciting one. Steve, how do you feel? What do you expect?
Well, thank you, Manu. And to me, this is like, I don't get to have these conversations during the week. I was sharing with Manu the other day that this is my normal. And when I step into the world, everybody's so disconnected and so not, they want to talk about the weather or what's happening on the news, and they want to argue about what's going on. I don't know. This is so grounding because it is about, and I don't mean it sounds kind of cliche, but this is about generalized principles upon that are, and like you said, Anne, they're the cosmic reality. And most people don't think cosmic. They don't think in terms of, okay, we got this macro universe and we have this little local part we're playing. It's like they think that whatever comes to them through the media is reality. And, reality is walking on the ground. So, and it's having these discussions and understanding not just where the mountain is, but what is a mountain?
Yeah.
Stopping for just a second, the topology of things. So I'm real grateful for the call. I'm real grateful for being kind of like the servant here. It kind of got handed off to me. I'm open for any feedback at all on what you would like to do. Send me an email or call me or do something during the week if there's something you'd like to see, because we want to implement it. And so I got notice from Susan that she's going into surgery. Otherwise, she would be here. I got notice from Joe that he's in another meeting and he'll come out about in another half hour or so. He'll join us. Joe will join us. And I got a notice from Phil, whom I don't know who that is, but they're evidently on the list. First he declined, then he said he'd be here, and he's not here. John, delighted that you followed through on your acceptance of the invitation, and good to see you. and Anne back joining us. So we ended off last year. Basically, we got to chapter 3 of the Grunch of the Giants book. But what we did last week, and as we started back in, I thought, well, we could just jump in with chapter 3, but I thought it might be a good idea to review what the Grunch of Giants is all about. And so we went back to the foreword and read it and spent a lot of time on the first couple pages of the foreword. But I think it'd be really good to look at that one more time. And then I have a proposal relating to that. So here's the foreword. I'll make it a little bit bigger so we can see it here, but I'll make it bigger in a minute. Here's the first page of the foreword, Grunch of Giants foreword, and we talk a little bit about it. And basically what he says is, if you take a look at the skyline, he's writing this book, I think it's 20 years after he wrote the design discipline. And he's saying he had a lot of hope for human beings 20 years ago, but now here we are in 1985, or in 1989, roughly speaking. And he says, if you look at the skylines of the major cities in the world, Tokyo, New York, San Francisco, St. Louis, Shanghai, Hong Kong, over that 20 years, if you look at their skylines, it looks like all of the wealth went into those buildings and people are still starving. And he sees it as it's the beginning of a crisis. He talks about here crisis. Now he could see that right here. It says, with all this crisis, he says, and I'm going to see if I can get this thing to expand here.
Next page. Yeah.
Yes, I'm going to go to the next page. I want to get it bigger first. There we go. I could see that there was an alternative to politics and its ever more wasteful, warring, and inherently vain attempts to solve one-sidedly all humanity's basic economic and social problems. So he sees an alternative, and this is the alternative. And this is kind of where we picked up last time. Now, and then he hit some basic ideas and concepts here. So I thought we'd finish this second paragraph, this big long paragraph up here, and then maybe look at these things in a little bit more detail, because we ran through them last year. But I think there's some issues here that as I started looking at these, I found that I didn't know much about it. So let's start from here. And John, you're back with us if you want to start reading. Let's do what we can at this paragraph and the next, and then we're going to have a little list of things that he did. But if you care to start reading.
I'll start there. That alternative was through invention, development, and reduction to the physically working stages of mass production, prototypes of each member of a complete family of intercomplementary artifacts, structurally, mechanically, chemically, metallurgically, electromagnetically, and cybernetically designed to provide so much performance per each erg of energy, pound of material, and second of time invested as to make it eminently feasible and practicable to provide a sustainable standard of living for all humanity.
Let's stop right there.
Yeah.
Let's stop right there, because that's a chunk full of Bucky language. And so what he's saying here was, the part we didn't read was that, hey, I looked at all this investment in all the wrong things that haven't done anything to help humanity's problems. And he says there is an alternative. And what does he say his alternative is?
Well, I think one of the best examples of his alternative is this, the mobile phone. Because he said, we are going to develop intercomplementary artifacts, structurally, mechanically, chemically, metallurgically, electromagnetically, and cybernetically designed to provide so much performance per each erg of energy, pound of material, and second of time invested. So he talked about ephemeralization, and ephemeralization is the process of constantly doing more with less.
Right.
So in January 1994, I started my present firm. And I wanted everybody to make a commitment to technology. So it was a condition of your employment that you would buy a notebook computer, because I wanted you to have a personal commitment. We arranged a bank loan and we paid you an allowance, which covered the payments on the bank loan. But it was your computer. You had to buy it, you had to take on the debt, and you had to make the commitment. Now, I can remember that the notebook computers, which we purchased in January 1994, cost $7,000 Australian then.
Wow.
And they had a fraction of the capacity and function of this.
Yeah.
They were little Toshiba laptops. They were chunky, they were solid, but $7,000. We're talking about 29 years ago. That's probably the equivalent now of what, 4 times that? Maybe 28,000. I'll get this for what? 3?
$1,000.
No, in the US. In Australia, I'm probably going to pay 2 or 3 for a top of the range iPhone 14. So even if it's 3 opposed to 28 or 30, it's a tenth of the cost with so much more capacity and functionality. That was just a computer. That was a small computer. It had no ability to send and receive text messages. It had no ability to take photographs, to play music, to to problem solve, to do all sorts of things. So the impact that the smartphone has had on the world, well, it's had some very negative impacts too. It hasn't been all positive, a bit like the motor car. Motor cars certainly were an improvement over the horse and cart, but a lot of people are killed in accidents. A lot of things that are negative are done with cars, and they've polluted the environment. So it's really only positive, but Bucky was talking about ephemeralization. This paragraph is what he summarized in one word: ephemeralization. We must constantly be doing more with less.
Right.
And
he says that his alternative to chaos is through invention and development of this technology, where each piece of technology provides a sustainable standard of living for humanity.
Now, if you think about technology, the development of the computer, and particularly the mobile computer, has enabled people now, particularly with the acceleration of the last 3 years, to work remotely.
Right.
The percentage of the population, certainly in a country like Australia, that now work remotely at least part of the time, as opposed to 3 years ago. So it's leading to huge changes in society, in employment, the office space that's needed, everything else, right? And that would remind me to come back to something I saw yesterday. So we talked a couple of months ago about the new building that's being built in Sydney, which is going to be the head office for Atlassian.
Yeah, you sent us a text on that and we saw it, or an email.
Yeah, well, I received a message yesterday from somebody who's involved with Genie in Victoria. Genie, of course, being something that's come out of Bucky's work, Global Energy Network. Have you run across Peter Myson?
No.
Peter Myson's an American engineer who was exposed to Bucky's work in the late 80s and gave up his job to commit himself full-time to Bucky's idea of linking the world's electricity grids and making energy available to everybody on the planet in a more sustainable fashion. So using renewable energy. So Peter Myson has been the head of Genie based in San Diego since the late 80s, early 90s. So if you search Genie, GENI.org, it's an NGO, a non-government organisation recognised by the United Nations, but it's just a small part of Bucky's work that's been picked up by a group. Anyway, I received a message from somebody who's active with Genie in Victoria with a new building that's designed around a tree. It's built like a tree. It's zero pollution. It includes office space and living space with open balconies facing in on greenery, just quite outside of any traditional architectural thinking. It's another step further than the Atlassian building in Sydney.
Is this already built?
It's been designed. I don't think it's been built yet.
When you get a rendering, an elevation of it, send it to us, please.
So yeah, Bucky was saying, as I understand it, let's stop. I mean, he talked about living-re and killing-re.
Right.
He did a lot of work in the early 80s and mid 80s. He did a costing on what the world was spending on armaments and defence.
Yeah.
And he said, we are investing more in killingry than we are in livingry. He calculated, I think about the mid-80s, that for about a quarter of what the world was then spending on armaments and defence, I think then in the mid-80s, US was spending about 400 billion a year, the Soviets were spending about 400 billion a year, and the rest of the world was spending about 200 billion a year. So it was about 1,000 billion a year being spent on armaments and defence. And he calculated that for about a quarter of that, we could provide clean drinking water to every person on the planet. We could stop deforestation. We could replant forests. We could do so many other things to improve the environment for everybody on the planet. So he said, you know, we're driven more by fear than by the fear of what we don't want than the desire for what we do want.
Right.
But yes, I think ephemeralization is what he was saying was if we focus on this, we'll stop building weapons and we'll build things that will improve everybody's standard of living. But there are still enough people who aren't interested in everybody having a good standard of living for that not to be the focus.
I find it, yeah. Sorry, John. Maybe I interrupted you.
No, you're right, Manu.
I find it quite powerful that one of the basic principles that Bucky talk about is most of the time we seem to, is so basic and so evident that we forget about it. Is that the duality? It came to me when you talk about living gray and killing gray. And the fact that most of the time we become prisoner of a phase. Look, life is, if you've thought in terms of structure of thinking, geometry of thinking, if you always thought in dual, you will see that there is always two sides, at least, and then the edge. And that you better be on the edge. And that the more it is evolving, the sharper the edge is becoming. And you got to be aware of it, you got to be educated, and you got to elevate yourself and society in order to be able to handle what is being uncovered there. I don't know if I'm making myself a little bit clear or if it's confusing. In other words, there's always the evil side of any angel thing. I'm saying it figuratively. So there is always a plus and a minus, gravity, radiation. Now, what you have to do in terms of decision, when you have that and you see it and you can handle it, you know, how am I going to use it in this phase? And if I'm in this phase, am I thinking enough about that other phase that will inevitably happen? You can't box it, right? You cannot box it. So like the biggest example that comes is, to me, lately what we call the blockchain 10 years ago, or no, when was it? 20 years ago, blockchain?
I don't know.
2009, yes, 2009, 15, 10, a little more than 10 years ago, you have blockchain. And immediately it morphed into a frenzy for all of this, how do you call it? Bitcoin and all this? You call
yes.
And nobody saw what is happening. And today we are at the risk of completely be submerged by central banker issuing digital currencies with a technology and having complete control over us, the user. So what we wanted to avoid, we have taken it on the golden plate in a silver spoon and put in the mouth of government, or on the central banker, of all those people that want to control and regulate initiative. Do you understand what I'm trying to say, John?
I think so. I think what you're saying is that banking is one example of enabling a few people to take control of and to manipulate the world. And if you look at the GFC as a very good example, the banks did so much damage, cost so many ordinary people everything they had, damaged whole countries' economies, and very few of them answered for it.
Yeah,
Within a few years, they were back to doing what they'd been doing before. So there's a real tension there. Governments and the banks work in collusion. The governments depend on the banks and the banks depend on the government. But we've had a banking royal commission here in Australia that's exposed huge abuses, people being charged for things that weren't being done for them. The banks were involved in financial advising and insurance, everything else. And the corruption and the misuse of power by the banks led to huge changes, but still only at the edges, not fundamental changes. And now we've got the government looking at legislation to minimise the use of cash, to restrict the use of cash. COVID has been a great excuse to increase the use of electronic banking as opposed to cash. Once you have to do everything online through a bank, with the government able to access all that information, the ability to control is even greater. I mean, in countries like Greece, when things got tough, they just stopped the ATMs working and people couldn't access their money.
Mm-hmm.
You might have had money in the bank, but you couldn't get anything you could use. And if the internet goes down and there's no electronic banking, well, then you're really in trouble if you don't have cash in your pocket.
Yeah.
So,
but my point, John, is that they do so using the very same technology that was supposed to free people.
exactly, yes.
Because
yes.
we forgot that one of the essence of it was to be decentralized.
Yes.
Is a decentralized ledger. It was in the distribution of it that was the strength. But then we have been, in terms of the applications of it, this is now trying to do something anti-entropic with what is a principle.
Mm-hmm.
We went into a frenzy, a rush into cryptocurrencies, speculating, and giving the government the excuse to say, oh, we're going to step in now and stop this thing. And the way we're doing it is that we are building a kind of, we are issuing, for example, the crypto dollar, right? But we are guaranteeing, so it's not a fiat. We are guaranteeing that there's not going to be abuse. But who guarantees the government? Because at the time when it's necessary, as you say in Greece, in Cyprus, they will just stop. And then we'll find ourselves completely dumb.
Look at Lebanon. Look at the state of Lebanon. Do you know what's happened in Lebanon? The economy's been completely destroyed by government. The currency now is worth, I think, 5%. Has 5% of the purchasing power that it had as recently as, I think, about 5 years ago. So through government mismanagement of the economy, they don't even have a functioning parliament at the moment. If you're a Lebanese person and you've got $100 equivalent, it will now buy 5% of what it would buy 5 years ago. So your money has been stolen from you by the government by mismanagement of the economy.
Yeah, and we just got we just to add on to what you're saying, we just got word, it was recently just published to our people in Malaysia, right? That we actually had one of the actually was the highest ever in terms of trade, our trade revenue and everything ever. And we used to have a $15 billion trade surplus, right? Or but what has happened is that last year alone, each month we were trading at 21 billion, I'm not sure if it's ringgit or dollars, but we were trading at that level. And I think we hit over the whole year highest that we've ever been before. And the government just announced that 30% is lost into the system of corruption. you know. So we are all in Malaysia, we are hopeful. The only thing is we also are praying and hoping that the current Prime Minister, who was supposed to take it on a few years back, but Mahathir kind of played everybody out, and it was passed on to another guy who stole about 92 billion ringgit out of the country, you know. And now it seems his son has disappeared. We don't know where he's gone, right? So so now the current Prime Minister, he's holding two roles, that of a Prime Minister and the Finance Minister, but he's taking one pay, not taking two pays, two salaries. And then he chose our local car rather than the luxury car, and he would go to work with three ringgit. That's not even 80 cents of US cents, right? 3 ringgit socks to work, So we were very hopeful, because I think the route that he's taking is very close to the president of the Indonesia. Oh, yeah. So, but we hope that he can stay, because for him to have that strength to hold on and to get rid of corruption, with people wanting him out of the way so they can continue doing what they're doing. That is, yeah. And by the way, okay, this is recorded, so I can't say that. Maybe later when we stop recording, I can share with you. Yeah, a little bit more. Because that one is for...
I could pause the recording.
Yeah.
Should I pause the recording, folks? I'm going to pause.
Sure. Sorry?
Is Anwar Ibrahim, who is Prime Minister of Malaysia now, right?
Yes,
I just Google now. It's called Melongwe. He was put in jail.
Yeah, he was.
He was under the charges of sodomy and whatever, put in jail.
Yeah.
20 years ago.
Mm. Yeah. And because of that, then he also had clarity as to who were his real supporters and who were not. Yeah. So that was what I learned from people who are very close to him. Yeah. Mm. So anyway, yeah, carry on. So I really love that. And just to add on, because we're talking about Bucky after all, right? And his Grunch of Giants. Please. I shared ephemeralization and it with my other partner, and my goodness, now he's like, yes, and he's shouting out about it, because it is only through ephemeralization that our countries and people, and he loves it, because I got this off from one of my parents who said that today's children have to solve problems bigger, better, faster, cheaper, safer, greener, all at the same time, right? So we start looking at that, and I know for a fact that unless you have ephemeralization, you will not achieve that. But you're right, John, looking at what the phones can do, and we're seeing that in our vehicles as well. Like right now, the cars are so comfortable, and you can do so many things inside that in Hong Kong, people use cars as moving offices. So instead of rushing from place to place to have meetings, they all just come together and go into a vehicle. And because the MPVs can be done in such a way where you can even turn seats around, you can literally have meetings, and you have the TVs are there, and so literally you can run meetings and you have a moving office, right? And it's sooner or later when we have the automatic driving cars, and that will change the way we live, where we live, and so on. So
I must share a funny story about meeting in vehicles. Many years ago now, I think about 20 years ago, a psychiatrist in New York who was badly needed by his patients, who were all under such huge pressure, high performers in New York, that they started cancelling appointments because they said, we just don't have the time. We can't find the time for an appointment. And he thought, this is not good for business. They're even more in need of my help, but they're now convinced they're so busy they can't make the time to come and see me. So he got a van and fitted inside the back of the van out as a consulting room. And then he would pick them up from home and have their session on the way to work, because it would take them at least an hour to get to work in the traffic at New York. And so every morning on the way to work. He would fit in, several appointments with people, and the same in the afternoon. You'd be collected from the office, and the time you would have spent traveling home in the traffic anyway, you were having your session with your psychiatrist, who was trying to keep you sane despite the pressure of working in New York. And I just thought that was so funny, such a great ephemeralization, using their traveling time as their consulting time with their psychiatrist. But yes, you're quite right.
That's a great example, because that's actually a great stress time. People go to psychiatrists because they have stress, they have problems. And if you can simulate that, on a trip to or from work, that's quite interesting to be, because you have all of those pressures coming around you, and if the proviso is that they will be able to think, during that trip.
Well, they couldn't see out. There was a driver driving the van. They're in the back in a room.
Okay. All right.
In a comfortable chair, having their consultation with their psychiatrist.
Very cool. And John, you said that I have a note here that you wanted to tell us about something you saw yesterday.
That was the building. That was the message
good.
from the Genie supporter in Victoria. Yeah.
Okay, really good. Want to make sure we got that. Okay, let's continue with our reading. As I looked at this, it might be good to pick up right here, because when he does the dash, more advanced, this kind of describes what it's talking about. So if you want to start with invested as.
Sure. More advanced, pleasing, and increasingly productive than any ever experienced or dreamed of by anyone in all history. It was clear that this advanced level could be entirely sustained by the many derivatives of our daily income of sun energy. It was clear that it could be attained and maintained by artifacts that would emancipate humans from piped, wired, and metered exploitation of the many by the few. This family of artifacts leading to such comprehensive human success, I identified as livingry, in contradistinction to politics weaponry. I called it technologically reforming the environment instead of trying politically to reform the people. So, shall we stop there?
That's a powerful line. He wants to use technology to reform the environment rather than trying to politically reform the people.
Okay, but let's take it this way, Steve, right? And let's go from the premises to the possible conclusion that are in accordance with the principles. We have the sun, right?
Right.
The sun has a daily allocation of energy.
Right.
Every day, every 24 hours, at any time, there's part of the earth that receives maximum sun in comparison to other parts. Okay?
Yes.
And then our use of energy is phased, because we need to sleep. When we sleep, we use less energy. And when we are alive, active, we use more. So when you take those two, you put together, it means that your thought and your concentration should be on building the communication line of transmission of energy from one place to the other at the global scale of Earth. Is it what we've done? No. And that is the basic, that's what I call the trap of being in a phase. We are in a phase and we are ideological about it, that we want to appropriate. We create something, there is something there, we want to appropriate. Solar, okay, we start seeing that, the rare earths are in one place, and we play in the politics one place against where the technology is and all these things. All of those disruption. This is not congruent to the view of the source being free to the earth.
There are examples, Manu, of where we are doing what Bucky recommended. At some stage a long time ago, My feeling is it's over 30 years ago. California started buying a large part of its electricity from Hydro-Quebec. As the ability to transmit electricity over distances improved, it was possible to tap into renewable sources in a different time zone or a different place. And certainly I have some memory of California being a major purchaser of electricity from Hydro-Quebec, which avoided the need for power stations, more power stations in California. Similarly, I think there's a huge solar generating plant in Northern Africa that supplies a large amount of electricity to Europe because it's extremely sunny, extremely hot and very open. And so the government of this country earns significant foreign income from the sales of electricity into Europe. But it hasn't been done overall, and it hasn't been done with the view of freeing human beings, of reforming the environment. And in fact, look at the Ukraine and Russia. So this has been a fascinating struggle. First of all, Russia is a huge generator of non-renewable energy from oil and gas, and Europe has relied heavily on that. And with the sanctions against Russia, that's accelerated the transition to energy independence, or certainly not dependence on Russia in Europe. Europeans are actually willing to have less energy and to pay more for it to avoid using Russian energy. So who knows what the end result will be of the war in the Ukraine in terms of Europe and energy sources and the increasingly rapid development of renewable energy sources. So, but yes, the point Bucky was making is this isn't something that politicians should interfere in. We don't want politicians controlling it, making money out of it, and using it to control people. We want the environment reformed. We want people enjoying a higher standard of living and with greater freedom. And it's that problem of politicians, of borders.
And it's not only the politician, John, because it's also the greed of individuals.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, you have all of this, the line of all of these guys who are so-called worth hundreds of billions of dollars. I don't know how many of them are in the world. And they are semi-gods to many, many people. So it's the same drive, whether it's at the government level or as individual. That's why I think Bucky says the final examination of that of the individual. Now, how to get it at a aggregate level, that final examination reaches the critical mass. I don't know, but that has been the problem.
Well, it's those words that would emancipate humans from piped, wired, and metered exploitation of the many by the few.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is where he kind of, he's being idealistic because he's talking about these complementary artifacts. He's talking about this family of artifacts that would emancipate humans from piped, wired, and metered exploitation. In other words, the technology has been invented, but it's not emancipating everybody. It's still piped and wired and metered as far as we're concerned.
Yep.
And so, you know, but he's hoping that this technology would reform the environment and create a healthy environment for people rather than trying to politically reform people and help them choose things that are not. It's amazing how Americans continue to vote for politicians and programs that are not to their own well-being.
Yeah.
It boggles my mind. He continues to explain there that he explained this concept with his book Critical Path, which we read last year. Let's continue on with this paragraph, and then we'll get to some things that I think are kind of interesting, and we'll have a discussion as to how we want to approach what comes from here. John, do you want to read from Equally?
Yes, I will. Let me just find it.
right here.
Yes. Equally important, I set about 55 years ago, 1927, to see what a penniless, unknown human individual with a dependent wife and newborn child might be able to do effectively on behalf of all humanity in realistically developing such an alternative program. Being human, I made all the mistakes there were to be made, but I learned to learn by realistic recognition of the constituent facts of the mistake making and attempted to understand what the uncovered truths were trying to teach me.
Now, do you remember when we read before that he talked about that he invented all this technology like modular housing, but then found out he could and constructed a prototype, was ready to roll, but no banks would finance it.
That's right. Yeah.
And he acknowledged that it would take 10 or 20 or 30 years to change the system to be able to implement the new technology. But instead of just becoming overwhelmed, he decides to create a whole bunch of technology and just keep throwing it out there and then waiting for the implementation timelines to start getting reduced. That seems to be his approach. Okay.
So in my Philadelphia archives, there are approximately 40,000 articles published during the last 60 years, which successively document my progressive completions of the whole intercomplementary family of scheduled artifacts. These living re-items include the following.
Now, this is interesting because when we read this the first time, we just kind of whopped through it. My question is, like, I went out, I reread this last week, and I thought, well, what is tensegrity? And I actually have got a paper, a 1-page filled of resources. So he's got a whole bunch of them here. Let's read these, and then let's come back and look at tensegrity, look at Dymaxion House, look at the 250-pound bathroom. I've got an article on that. And then his synergetics idea. Let's read those, and then maybe let's take a look and see if we want to examine each one more closely. Go ahead.
Sure. Tensegrity. The continuous tension, discontinuous compression, structuring principle of universe. That is, stars not touching planets, electrons not touching their atomic nuclei, introduced to planet Earth to replace the continuously compressioned, secondarily tensioned structuring in present world around engineering theory.
Okay, let's pause right there. Yeah, go ahead. Designed
Okay,
in.
let me go in there with one example of that.
Okay.
The first application at greater scale of it was in 1957 or thereof, in the mid-50s, with the building of pre-constrained bridges.
Oh.
You see the bridges where you have the two anchors that are in such a way that the normal state of a bridge is an arc like this, is bombed. Have you seen that? That's the way they build bridges now. So that is a continuous tension of a bridge, because you take it like this, and then you pull the two edges in such a way that is like that. So the bridge is continuously tensioned. Now, when you have a truck coming onto the bridge and passing, then the bridge goes back to the zero state the zero, like you annul the moment of compression that you had before. You push it back to be horizontal.
Right.
But that is only valid as long as it is loaded with a truck that is passing on the bridge. It's discontinuous.
Right.
That is the application. And that's the way that revolutionized the way bridges were built. Before bridges were built in arcs like this, what you did is that you had concrete structure and you had arches like this, arcs on the bridge, under the bridge, mainly to allow water to pass.
Yeah.
Remember that?
The Romans built bridges that way.
Yes, that was the old technology. But that all with steel and concrete, that all changed in the mid-50s. And that is, you can now build bridges that are very safe over very large rivers. I mean, at that time, the first one was built in Africa somewhere in 1954, and it was 1 mile wide bridge, 1 mile long. You hear what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yes, that was the first application of it. So in a, initial, in a normal state, the bridge is tension, is like this. When it is loaded, it comes like that, horizontal. Because now you have the weight of a truck passing over that is pushing it back, and then the constraint in the bridge is 0. Because that compression annuls the tension that was on it, and it's safer.
Yeah. Are you guys aware that Bucky actually invented the word tensegrity?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I have an article here.
But we always understand tensegrity as tension and compression acting all the time. That's not it only. It is continuous tension and discontinuous compression.
Yeah.
Working together to create systems that are more performant in terms of being, you see the way it is. It's continuous tension, discontinuous compression.
Yeah.
That is an aspect that we don't usually see. We don't usually talk about.
Yeah. This is interesting because it says here in 1948, the artist Kenneth Snelson created a sculpture called X-Piece, which later inspired the term tensegrity. As I read this, however, if you read Buckminster Fuller's blog for the Institute for Buckminster Fuller, Kenneth was listening to Bucky talk about tensegrity and then went and designed this piece of art. So in that article, it gives Snelson the kind of credit for developing tensegrity. But if you read the artist's rendition of what happened, he heard Bucky talk and said, gee, I wonder if I could create a sculpture that does that. And he called it Early X-Piece, 1948. He took 2 X's from a propeller-shaped piece of plywood and suspended one over the other using a matrix of nylon tension lines. So this is this idea of tensegrity. It hangs there by itself. So anyway, I made a little study of tensegrity and I put together those little pages, and I thought that was quite interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny because some sources give Bucky the credit for it, and this one does. Kenneth Snelson, with his structure Soft Landing, I guess this is Soft Landing, which was installed in Denver in 1982 as an art student. He became enchanted by the lectures on geometric forms delivered by Buckminster Fuller. So he gives him a Bucky credit for that. So
no, I mean, Fred, Bucky discovered the principle.
Right.
This guy did the first application of it.
In art.
There are 2 different things. Yes.
Yeah. And he became enchanted by Bucky's lectures on geometric forms. And so he built this piece of art based on that kind of thing. Okay, so that was tensegrity. I enjoyed that. I didn't understand what tensegrity was. I wonder, Anne, if that's a word that you can use as you're trying to blow people's, out of the box and get them out of the old thinking. This idea of continuous compression and decompression, right? The continuous tension and continuous compression.
And the other way that you are forget that we are just overlooking there, Steve, is the continuous tension and discontinuous compression structuring of universe. That's what Bucky, that's Bucky's credit. That's what he discovered.
Right.
He said that's the way universe function.
Yeah. How
and since we are in the world, what he's saying is that let's observe general principles and try anti-entropically to repeat them locally, to do things that will help us. And that's what that guy did. He did a structure. He actually applied that. It's like Einstein and relativity. and then the first eclipse that allow it to be observed.
Right on.
So the credit didn't go to that guy. The credit went to Einstein for discovering relativity. And the other credit in terms of evidencing it practically went to the other guy that did the experiment of observing the eclipse.
Yeah. Okay, we can continue. You guys got tensegrity then.
Mhm.
I hope, I don't know, I hope it was a really profound excuse for me to go out and find some more information. You want to read about the Dymaxion house?
I do. The Dymaxion house, the autonomous, mass-producible, air-deliverable dwelling machine, weighing only 3% of its equivolumed and equipped conventional counterpart single-family dwelling. Designed 1927, modelled 1928, and helicopter delivered 1954.
It took him almost 30 years to actually deliver one of these via helicopter, the Dymaxion house. And I've found if we go to Bucky's website, he talks about his livery, and here's his Dymaxion house, which is kind of interesting. And I had some other pictures of Dymaxion house, but I don't see any more on this page. So, and I didn't put it together like I did the tensegrity thing, but I thought that was kind of profound. If we go out and pardon me as I just go for it here, but I wanted to bring this up. I was reviewing some things, and Eisenhower in '54 said something amazing. Eisenhower said, every gun that is made, here comes Joe, every gun that is made, every warship launched, every rocket fired signifies in the final sense a theft from those who hunger and are not fed, those who are cold and are not clothed. This world in arms is not spending money alone, it is spending the sweat and labors of the genius of its scientists and the hopes of its children. The cost of one modern heavy bomber is this: a modern brick school in 30 different cities, in 2 electric power plants, each serving a town of 60,000 population, in 2 fine, fully equipped hospitals. It is some 50 miles of concrete pavement. Back in Eisenhower, back in the 50s, the U.S. was building its interstate freeways, which was really helping commerce by creating. They used the federal commerce law to justify building freeways to go from one end of the country to the other end of the country. We pay for a single fighter with 500,000 bushels of wheat. We pay for a single destroyer with no homes that could house more than 8,000 people. This is not a way of life at all, in a true sense. Under the cloud of threatening war, it's humanity hanging on a cross of iron. So this is President Eisenhower in the U.S. back in the 50s. And so Bucky was the guy who was fulfilling a lot of this. I wanted to—
Let me ask you a question, Steve.
Please.
Joe, we recognize you. Welcome. Okay.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, let me ask Steve this question.
Please.
Can you tell me one marked difference between Ike Eisenhower or Hoover? Is it Eisenhower?
Yeah, his name was Dwight. His name was Dwight David Eisenhower, and they called him Ike.
Okay. What is the difference between him and the many or most of the presidents that followed him? And what is most of the presidents that followed him?
Yeah.
And what is the resemblance between him and General Washington and Jefferson and Adams? You tell me.
Do you have any? I mean, I could talk about that's a big.
I can give you an answer about the difference, but I can't answer the link that you're making.
Yeah.
Okay, give me your difference. Give me your difference.
The difference is that Dwight Eisenhower saw the atomic bomb and he saw the military industrial complex. Those two things that he absolutely witnessed, and he saw them firsthand, and he called them out, and he knew the horrors of both.
Right. He saw the military industrial.
And nobody else is. They may see it, but they're already part of it. He actually saw it and called it out.
Called it out.
Let me guide you a little bit in what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Think of, especially of General Washington at the end of his term. What he's thinking, how he's seeing the world. And General Eisenhower at the end of his term.
Yeah.
What they saw, what they're really seeing is that at the end of their term, they are disappointed with the system of the other guys around and what is going on.
Yeah.
They carried a great revolution, a great change in society, and they have learned the lesson. They were practical men that understood principles. Later, we have people who thought they understand principles and they are not practical. That is what, and it comes to what Anne was talking about. What do you call a salesperson? What do you call a master of sales? What do you call a PhD of sales? You get me? Today, most of American presidents, when they leave office, they are all in the system, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
They make big money, appearing, giving talks and things like that. They will never speak about those problems that Bucky is talking about there, or what General Washington is talking about, General Eisenhower. They're not engaged into those things. I don't know if I'm wrong or right, but that's what I think.
Yeah. Well, Eisenhower did. I mean, Washington did something else. I mean, all these guys have gray area. I mean, there are things Washington did before the revolution where he went out and got as much land as he could. I mean, but Washington saw that to be president for longer than 2 terms would be just like having royalty in England. And he stepped down and said, nope, we're going to let the Constitution of the US do its job, and we're going to have another president here. Nobody wanted to do that, but he stepped down to make it happen. Eisenhower, when he left, he not only talked about the military industrial complex, he talked about how the Dulles brothers had tricked him and manipulated him, how the CIA had manipulated him, that a lot of things had been done under his administration, that if he had been aware of the facts, he would not have done those things. So in a way, I love the idea of you comparing George Washington with Eisenhower. When I was in 1958, I was in junior high school, and I did a report. We had to do a report on a president. I did my report on Eisenhower. I read a couple of books on him, and I was his biggest fan. Before I did the report, my mom was a Republican, and she was voting for Eisenhower, and there was a big thing out there, I like Ike, and that was a big thing. So let's move to the next thing, because have we read it yet? Maybe we haven't read it. Maybe I'm jumping ahead. Okay, there's the Dymaxion house. And here's the next thing. The one
piece 250-pound bathroom, designed 1928, prototype 1936, mass-produced in polyester fiberglass in West Germany in 1970.
So in 1970,
32 years it took the lag.
It took the lag. And here are pictures of the bathroom that he designed. This is Buckminster Fuller's bathroom. And it was developed in West Germany and produced in West Germany. Here's some more. Let's see if we can get some more. These pictures are kind of clunky. I'm just saying, if one takes the time to study some of these things, that it just was interesting to me, because I stopped during the week to take a look at this. This is the Dymaxion house. Here's some drawings of the Dymaxion house. And then here's this bathroom, a unit bathroom. So I don't know. It's just, we went through this really rapidly the first time. And as I started looking at this stuff, I was quite enchanted. I'm ready to continue.
Is it not his toilets that have been adapted to on the aircraft?
I don't know.
The one that we have today, that is sucked by high pressure thing.
Yeah, I don't know.
But his was a way of building it faster, cheaper, more efficiently, because instead of laying tiles on the floor and laying tiles on the walls once it was built,
Right.
this was all done as one piece in a factory, done in polyester, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Plastic, yeah, polyester fiberglass, which made it faster and better in many ways.
And they do fiberglass surrounds in tubs and showers today. They have one piece shower surround in tubs, and those are very common in American construction. I don't know about the rest. Shall we continue?
Yes, sure.
Synergetics.
Synergetics, exploration and publishing of the four-dimensional geometrical coordinate system employed by nature. Discovered 1927, published 1944.
Yeah, that's his tetrahedron, right? Here we go. Want to continue, John?
Sure. Dymaxion world map. Discovery and development of a new cartographic projection system by which humanity can view the map of the whole planet Earth as one world island in one world ocean, without any visible distortion in the relative size and shape of any of the land masses and without any breaks in the continental contours. This is the undistorted map for studying world problems and displaying in their true proportion resources and other data. Discovered 1933, published 1943.
Let's let Manu roll on this thing. Go for it.
That's it. That's the dimension map. Yeah.
Okay, hold up higher so we can see it.
Yeah, this is it.
Okay, good.
Yep. An icosahedron.
Yeah. John has it on his wall. You had it.
I do. I have them on the walls at home and in the office.
This you can get at Amazon, and then you can play with, putting together. Putting those things together to make the.
But the beautiful thing about that, it shows Africa for the size that it is, and shows Europe for the size that it is, and the U.S. and South America. But every other map distorts that, and this map has relatively little distortion, if none at all.
Yeah.
And if you want to hold it up, yeah.
But it also shows a greater interconnection between the land masses than the Mercator projection. The Mercator projection has us separated. Here you see it laid out from the North Pole. You can see a connected land mass.
There it is.
Right on.
It's connected.
And it shows the relative size of South America, which is really quite amazing. If you Google it, here are a couple of, here, let's see if we can get this guy up here. I don't know if we're going to be able to get it to come. Oh, I don't know. This is where I get to, sometimes these websites, I accept, go ahead and get my cookie. And I'm not going to subscribe. Okay, here we go.
You're earning this map.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. So that's kind of distorted in terms of the coloration.
Yeah, the colors don't help on that.
And this is really nice. This one is really nice. You can have it from Amazon.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And
That
you can do
first
that.
one, you had the light blue oceans, is a better one to look at. When you had a number of them up there, you had that one, the first one, the left
First
hand.
one. Yeah.
This one?
That's the better one. That's the one I've got in my office. Yeah.
Okay. There it is.
Yep, that's it. That's a good one. You can see the connection and you can see the oceans in it.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's
And
only one. It's only one landmass. You can see it. It's one. It's not two.
Yeah.
It's continuous.
Hmm.
And what's interesting is that Australia over here, I mean, it's pretty obvious that Australia is just damn near as big as the US, if not bigger. And because Canada comes down here and chunks into it. And
No,
Mexico,
Australia is not bigger than the US. No,
Australia is not bigger, but it's pretty close. I mean,
it's like half. Australia is like half the US.
yeah, look how big
Oh, is that all?
South
Yeah.
America,
Like half.
look how big South America is to North America, and look how big Africa
Let
is.
me Google that. I think it's like half. Australia.
Wow.
I think Australia's nearly as big as the US.
Versus US size.
But
Yes.
Australia does not have snowbird ski resort.
No,
Are you
it's
sure?
only slightly.
Sure?
Australia is quite big.
I'm not sure, John. I'm
Well,
not sure.
we do have snowboarding. We
Well,
do
I
have
meant
ski resorts.
snowbird, which
No,
is a
so-
Snowbird.
yeah,
I thought you were snowboarding. Okay.
yeah. I knew
Sorry,
you
John. Sorry, you are big. You are large. It's
were bigger than
only
US.
slightly smaller than the US.
Yeah.
Oh, slightly
I
smaller.
was wrong there. Yeah.
Cool.
It's actually the fourth largest country in the world, Australia.
Yeah.
So you have Russia, Canada, US, and Australia.
Hmm.
So you are bigger than China.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Wow. Wow, that's impressive. That's
Now, the
impressive.
world game. Who has played the world game?
I have
No,
not.
I haven't played.
I have
I
not,
know
no.
I've seen it, but I haven't played.
I've done it a couple of times. It's an amazing experience. But it's
Oh,
quite a
really?
logistical exercise because you need the size of a basketball court to lay out the map. And you get allocated a role. You may be a member of the UN. You may be an African nation. You may be the leader of an African nation. And you're given the problems and the challenges of whatever your job is. And it's an experiential introduction to how interconnected we are and how we either make it work for everybody or it doesn't work for anybody.
I've played the red and black game. Have you guys played that?
No.
It's a non-zero sum game, and it's really interesting because the only way everybody wins is to choose something for the other side, is to not win. The only way to win is to not win. And all you have to do is have one person make one time the move to win, and it throws everything off, and it's hard. You can't get back. You can't get back to equilibrium. So did we read the world game?
No, World Game, a grand strategy program developing the design science of solving all problems with artifacts invented by self or others, which take advantage of all scientific technological development through studies of their effects on the total world's social and economic affairs as ascertainable from the Dymaxion Sky Ocean World Map, a means of assessing the feasibility of realizing various initiatives in solving world problems. Invented 1927, applied 1928.
Cool. Comments or questions on that?
No.
Okay, let's see if I can get this thing.
My
to move.
question is, John, I've been trying to get World Game and all these things on Amazon. I can't get them. They're out of print or whatever.
Contact the Buckminster Fuller Institute.
Okay.
Okay.
Because they have the intellectual property. They own it. And I think we organised it through them when we played it.
Who did that? When you say we, John, who was that?
That was Jeannie in Australia in the 1990s.
Gee, it's only $2,500 to get this map. But I'm sure it's an original or something. Okay, let's continue. You want to start with trends there, John?
Yes, okay. Trends and transformation charts. These depict the total history of all the metallurgical, chemical, electromagnetic, structural, and mechanical trendings to greater performance per given amounts of given materials, time and energy. A compendium of all the scenarios of science and technology's evoluting advances. Chronological chart of total history of scientific discoveries and technical inventions. Chronological chart of the mining of all metals and recirculation of the scrap of those metals. Chronological charts of all major industries' performances assessed in terms of per capita human use. These charts, begun in 1928, first published 1937 at Bureau of Standards, Washington, D.C., published in 9 Chains to the Moon, 1938, published in Fortune magazine's 10th anniversary issue, 1940. This issue of Fortune went into 3 printings and took Fortune from red to black ink status. It changed USA and World Economic Health Assessment from a tonnage criteria to one based on energy consumption.
Huh.
Wow.
I just thought, you know, taking time to look at these things and see what the Google has to say about them. If we say Bucky charts, Buck, Minster, Fuller, trends and transformation charts. Ooh, 14 magazine.
There it is.
Yeah. The fullerfuturefest.com. Let's see what this does.
But that is a precursor to big data science, Joe.
How so?
In that, you know, it has all of these methods, many variables. And then it has data over a long period of time. And it tries to develop patterns
Yeah.
and life cycles of all of those things.
The octet
So
chart.
using all that big data in order to predict the future. That's actually that was Bucky used massive data, massive, to be able to do his prognosis.
Well,
Yeah.
the thing is that he had something more special than what even analysts have today for the most part. He had a way of tuning in with the data. And actually that approach, him being able to define boundaries and tune in, were essentially, yeah, that's what made Bucky special, and that's what data scientists today really aren't taught.
But that was also an application of one of the things that they say always start with macro,
Right.
the big view,
I
the
don't-
general flow line of energy, the
Yeah, they don't-
general principles. You
They-
look at that first. Yes.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, go on, Joe. That's
No, that's just it. They don't look at generalized principles. They just look at data. And they try and get as much as possible.
In a
And,
particular micro area. They don't put it in a context. And I think that was
They
Bucky's.
put it in their context.
They put it in their context, their local context. And
that's
Bucky was looking at it from a huge picture.
And then he was also looking at it from a design of humanity.
Right.
And so Bucky's principles now need to be applied more than ever, because a lot of the tools that Bucky didn't have are available, and how we start to think about things and infer what to do next. Well, really, I was just in a meeting, and Steve, you were there, about this very thing, about design. And I won't go into it too long, but essentially one of the questions I asked about behavioral economics. They said, well, that actually just is a relationship with only getting people to behave the way you want them to, as opposed to having a relationship with other individuals. And I really liked how that was actually described. Anyway, but it was all about how you design a system. You design the system with everybody in mind, like, and essentially their autonomy in mind.
And so, thank you. You know, Anne, if you have to leave, is this time for you to go? Do you want to just tell you how you're feeling? What's your big takeaway for today? If you have any takeaway, and then pass it on. We'll go ahead. It's 9:40. It's probably time to wind it up anyway. So thank you for posting that.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry, I actually pushed it far enough already with the family. Yeah, I think my biggest takeaway actually is, you know, what we are talking about today with tensegrity and all that. Okay, I'm going to compare it to ephemeralization, right? It was actually Joe. There was one meeting that we had that what you said just kind of pulled exactly what ephemeralization was for me. Okay, because up to that point, I was listening to it as separate pieces, like, you know, doing more with less and doing everything with nothing was separate. And then ephemeralization kept popping up and it was separate. And it was, I remember very distinctly that you mentioned it and you pulled these two things together. I mean, the two terms together, right? And it crystallized at that moment. So I'm waiting for tensegrity to crystallize for me as well. So here we go. It'll be one day, perhaps in the near future. When it comes together, then I'll share with you what we maybe figure out what to do with it. Yeah, but at the moment, okay, I've got here I wrote this down. I really love the definitions and his forward alone. Oh yeah, now I remember what I wanted to say. Because of the meetings and all that, so we're going to be functioning in this whole world of ephemeralization and doing what the pirates of old did. Okay, which is to function in the part of life where it is not governed, so you can make the change happen the way it should be done. All right, so thank you very much, guys.
Go ahead and pass it on to somebody else, Anne. We're going to wrap
Oh
it
yes,
up.
yes. Okay, so Joe, how do you feel and what's your takeaway today? Okay.
I feel grateful that I'm here. And I feel good to see everybody. It's always reassuring to see everyone. So this is a good moment in the weekend for me. What are my main takeaways today? I mean, actually, one of them is something that you just shared, and is this idea of how, even coming to the understanding of ephemeralization, and the way that I have best understood it is through mystique and play, and almost as a child, like kind of just playing around with designs of diagrams and drawing them, and actually then using magnets to connect them, and you start to see how you can do more with less. And then you start to understand the concepts of ephemeralization. It's iterative. It's an iterative process where you're kind of doing more and more, and you're just kind of have this discovery. So that was that's one of my takeaways is that since you brought that up, that's something I think about quite often when I think about Bucky, because I also think about the play. I really appreciated with what we were just talking about with the use of data and information. I think that that's really something that a lot of people just try and get as much data as possible and use it for their own personal interests, and they don't necessarily think of data and as the way they don't think of, they look at data as wisdom. And I think that that's a big mistake. They look at data as knowledge, and it's not. And I think that's where Bucky's principles would actually shed light on that, on what really is knowledge, what is wisdom. And it's not just data, it's both the metaphysical and the physical. And so I think that that's a really important point that I've given quite a bit of thought to. So you know, that's one of my takeaways as well, as I thought the Eisenhower discussion was very, very interesting as well. So again, I'm just grateful to have these moments with you, and thanks for getting up, Manu, and I hope Kelly's well, and I'm thinking about him. Maybe one of these days he'll make an appearance. If anybody's heard from him, please share. And it's good to see you, John Butler. Happy New Year. So it's so John, how are you feeling? What are you taking away from today?
I'm feeling good. It was good to reconnect, and especially to have such a big dose of exposure to Bucky and his ideas, because a lot of this is material that I studied and worked with through the 90s. I was first introduced to Bucky and his work in 1990, and quite actively worked with Kelly and others who became real Bucky fans through the 90s, played the World Game, had a lot to do with Jeannie in San Diego, visited San Diego for the centenary of Bucky's birth. So it's just been a real trip down memory lane and a huge reminder of things that I'd forgotten about consciously, but were still there unconsciously. And I don't think the problem has been solved or that things have improved at all since Bucky expressed the concerns he did in the Grunch of Giants, that it's still big business and government that are standing between humanity enjoying the standard of living that is possible and that happening. So great to be reminded of it, and great to have this refresher. And yes, I'm going to keep thinking about how in small ways we can start to make more of this happen. So yeah, a lot of thought going on, a lot of a lot of memories have come back. So thank you all. And now, Manu, I think you're next. So Manu, how do you feel? What do you take out of today?
Thank you, John. I feel good. I feel happy. And I'm grateful that we all here made it, you know, Joe, you know, could come. And really what I take away is one big word. That is that definition of tensegrity. And I beg you to listen to me well. I don't know if what I'm going to say is crazy, but you have tensegrity is the continuous tension and this continuous compression, structuring of universe. Now, listen to this. If you take radiation, radiation is everywhere, continuous, is ubiquitous, and is pervasive. Do we agree to that?
Sure.
Gravity is very effective locally. It manifests very locally. It is discontinuous.
Okay.
So tensegrity, in actual fact, is a definition of the pulsative nature of universe. You have this tension of radiation. Universe is expanding, doing whatever. And then you have gravity hitting from time to time at points locally. And that creates the pulsative character of universe, the wave, all of these things. So that's my biggest takeaway today. That generalization of the understanding of tensegrity, continuity, and then this continuous punching, gravitational on it to make the wavy and the pulsative nature, the dance of universe that way. That's what I take away. Steve, how do you feel? What do you take away?
Well, thanks, Manu. I'm really, the thing that really impressed me, the theme that's coming across here with this Dymaxion map, and I've just found a website that showed some of the charts that he built, so we'll share that next week. This idea that the map lacks distortion. And it seems to me that the human experience is just full of distortion. You know, I'm sitting here and I see things around me locally, and I think it's really big and important, and it's distorted, right? And I look at even the charts also bring a big perspective. So the distortion, the local distortion, if I look at the big picture, the local distortion starts to become less and less important. So the big word that hit me today is distortion, about this bias. You know, most people get the stats they need, they build the charts they need to prove their point. Everybody's trying to prove their freaking point. And the point is, at least what Bucky says, is that humanity gets left behind in all of that. I think that, you know, in spite of all the schemes of all these powerful people with all this money, I think there's a sneaky suspicion that these kids growing up on social media, my grandkids, my 9-year-old grandson, I'm not sure they're going to let all this political crap affect them as much as the politicians think it's going to. These crazy people coming up now, young people in U.S. politics, they have no, either we're going to go over the cliff or we're going to get rid of all the BS. So anyway, distortion was the big thing that came up for me. I'm really grateful for everybody sharing, and we'll do more of this next week. I found some of those charts. We'll take a look at the charts and continue with that little forward, because I think it's really important. Like John said, he experienced a lot of it. I've built straw bale houses. I went to workshops with where guys built houses with tires and everything, which is what Bucky was all into, right? And but I never caught the wave. I was always into the people and making sure everybody that was around me got a fair share, but I wasn't into the big thing like you were, John. So I acknowledge that, and I'm anxious to learn from you. And I'm so delighted we all get to share. Any suggestions, let me know. Thank you all, and we'll see you next week.
Sure.
Yep. Thank you so much. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Nice seeing you.
Hey.